Hello, online pipe community. This is Ethan, Parsimonious Piper, along with,
Butter Piper.
and we've done a couple of episodes now of C.S. Lewis Screwtape letters. And Father Brian would like to, he'd like to say a couple of things about this series.
Thank you, Ethan. Yes, I got a few positive comments. Well, more than a few, but a few comments were asking on my channel about thanking for this series, but why aren't you going deeper or talking about more modern subjects and that? And so it challenged me to think that I'm looking at a few ways in which I'm finding this so beneficial. One, personally, it's helping me in my own journey of faith to think in a different way, as Lewis talks in his preface, getting to know Ethan, but also to be able to share this with everyone here. And we only have so much time, and we really would like to spark discussion, to spark comments. And if you have specific uh, ideas or topics or things that you would like to share, put them in the comments. Put them in the comments of this video, because I think it's just so powerful to be able to connect, to talk, to see where the Spirit wants to bring, because that's what Screwtape is telling Wormwood to keep us from doing.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we've got a 10 to 15 minute window that we're trying to stay in. And there's just so much depth in some of these letters. We couldn't possibly discuss it all. But if we're a springboard for you thinking, and as Father Brian says, and for letting the Holy Spirit work in you and in your mind, wonderful. That's what we're hoping to do. Let's go ahead and dive right into this third letter. My dear Wormwood, I'm very pleased by what you tell me about this man's relations with his mother, but you must press your advantage. The enemy will be working from the center outwards, gradually bringing more and more of the patient's conduct under the new standard, and may reach his behavior to the old lady at any moment. You want to get in first. Keep in close touch with our colleague Glubos, who is in charge of the mother, and build up between you in that house a good settled habit of mutual annoyance. Daily pinpricks. The following methods are useful. 1. Keep his mind on the inner life. He thinks his conversion is something inside him, and his attention is therefore chiefly turned at present to the states of his own mind, or rather to that very expurgated version of them, which is all you should allow him to see. Encourage this. Keep his mind off the most elementary duties by directing it to the most advanced and spiritual ones. Aggravate that most useful human characteristic, the horror and neglect of the obvious. You must bring him to a condition in which he can practice self examination for an hour without discovering any of those facts about himself which are perfectly clear to anyone who has ever lived in the same house with him or worked in the same office. 2. It is, no doubt, impossible to prevent his praying for his mother, but we have means of rendering the prayers innocuous. Make sure that they are always very spiritual, that he is always concerned with the state of her soul and never with her rheumatism. 2 advantages will follow. In the first place, his attention will be kept on what he regards as her sins, by which, with a little guidance from you, he can be induced to mean any of her actions which are inconvenient or irritating to himself. Thus, you can keep rubbing the wounds of the day a little sorer even while he is on his knees. The operation is not at all difficult, and you will find it very entertaining. In the second place, since his ideas about her soul will be very crude and often erroneous, he will, in some degree, be praying for an imaginary person, and it will be your task to make that imaginary person daily less and less like the real mother, the sharp tongued old lady at the breakfast table. In time, you may get the cleavage so wide that no thought or feeling from his prayers for the imagined mother will ever flow over into his treatment of the real one. I've had patients of my own so well in hand that they could be turned at a moment's notice from impassioned prayer for a wife's or son's soul to beating or insulting the real wife or son without a qualm. 3. When two humans have lived together for many years, it usually happens that each has tones of voice and expressions of face which are almost unendurably irritating to the other. Work on that. Bring fully into the consciousness of your patient that particular lift of his mother's eyebrows, which he learned to dislike in the nursery, and let him think how much he dislikes it. Let him assume that she knows how annoying it is and does it to annoy. If you know your job, he will not notice the immense improbability of that assumption. And of course, never let him suspect that he has tones and looks which similarly annoy her, as he cannot see or hear himself. This is easily managed. 4. In civilized life, domestic hatred usually expresses itself by saying things which would appear quite harmless on paper. The words are not offensive, but in such a voice or at such a moment that they are not far short of a blow in the face. To keep this game up, you and Glubos must see to it that each of these two fools has a sort of double standard. Your patient must demand that all his own utterances are to be taken at their face value and judged simply on the actual words, while at the same time judging all his mother's utterances with the fullest and most oversensitive interpretation of the tone and the context and the suspected intention. She must be encouraged to do the same to him. Hence, from every quarrel, they can both go away convinced, or very nearly convinced, that they are quite innocent. You know the kind of thing. I simply asked her what time dinner will be, and she flies into a temper. Once this habit is well established, you have the delightful situation of a human saying things with the express purpose of offending and yet having a grievance when offense is taken. Finally, tell me something about the old lady's religious position. Is she at all jealous of the new factor in her son's life? At all piqued that he should have learned from others and so late what she considers she gave him such good opportunity of learning in childhood? Does she feel he is making a great deal of fuss about it, or that he's getting in on very easy terms? Remember the elder brother in the enemy's story. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Thank you, Ethan. Now we have Screwtape advising Wormwood on how to use his relationships, and specifically his mother. And he pretty much, in the first paragraph, tells us what he wants Wormwood to stay away from. And that's how the enemy, being God the Father, works. Going from the center outwards. Stay away from that. And then, as you read, gives 4 different ways and examples to be able to keep his patient from getting to the center, getting to the heart of the matter. And it looks like the first 2 says about the spiritual. Let him stay inside of himself. Let him think he's being spiritual without dealing with the day-to-day dealings of life, with the problems that his mom might have, and use his as being a baby convert, a baby Christian. Use that to your advantage, where he thinks that the conversion in which he's having is all about him. It's all inside. And keep him there. Don't have him notice what's going on with his mom. In other words, keep him away from looking at conversion from what is going outside in the world. And that's how he'll have inner conversion with what's going on. And I personally, I found that very simple, but so enlightening, where we think the spiritual world is all about maybe the angels and what goes on with inside of us, and the conversion in which God wants us to have is through the daily actions and lives in which we live, especially those who are the closest to us in our household. And so I found that very enlightening of how Screwtape is trying to get Wormwood to work with this baby convert and this new Christian.
And one of the first objections that that some of us reading this may have is, well, hold on. This conversion is internal. Well, yes and no. It begins there. This and Lewis uses the word transformation in Mere Christianity. This change from the old man to the new begins inside, certainly, but if you look at just Jesus' own teachings, when he talked to Nicodemus, he he talked about how this being born again was required, and this rebirth is a spiritual thing. But he spent the majority of his teaching talking about things like, uh, what does it mean to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul? Well, he later he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's what loving God looks like, is keeping commandments. Well, that's a behavioral thing. And love each other as yourselves, behavioral thing. How will they know that you are mine? By the way you love each other, behavioral thing. So many of these things, the parable of the sheep and the goats. What's the difference? Behavior. And so we so often focus only on those internal things that it doesn't affect our outward behavior with other people. And I think that kind of sets the groundwork for his next points, which are pretty much just examples of that. That anybody who's lived with another human being knows that you may love that person to death, but there are things that person does that just irritate the snot out of you. And sometimes we elevate those things into sins. And here we are praying for this other person's spiritual well-being when the plank is in our own eye, and that person's soul is not in any danger. So we're praying for an imaginary person who doesn't really exist. We're praying for somebody who needs salvation or forgiveness, and when in fact it's us.
And thinking of that imaginary person, I thought of an example where I was sent to live in a parish, in a church, with an older priest. And I was a young priest. And he kind of enjoyed living by himself. And they said they wanted me to live in that parish, in that rectory. And I thought I was working around him, his schedule, his routine. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm making this work. And so one time we were talking, and he was a little annoyed with me, and he said to me, he goes, he said, I'm trying to make this work. In my mind, I'm thinking, you're trying to make this work. I'm trying to make this work. And it dawned on me that here I'm the one thinking I'm doing all this, but in his mind, he's making it work. And it just really made me think, okay, that imaginary person, and really not looking at maybe he's trying to make it work too. And what does that mean? So it brought that to mind.
Well, and this is a good letter, I think, also to remind us that throughout the book, Screwtape is not always directly attacking someone's faith, or even their salvation. He already told us in the last letter. He admonished Wormwood, "Hey, I hear your patient has become a Christian." So that's fait accompli. But he focuses on Wormwood learning to do things that disrupt our daily lives and take our minds off of, in this case, in this letter, off of the behaviors that we should be practicing and exhibiting, that demonstrate our faith, not that earn it, but but another thing, Jesus says that you'll know a tree by its fruit. Um, so all of these things are behavioral, and and it's not always just about directly attacking our faith. Sometimes the undermining comes in disrupting the daily.
Exactly. And I know Lewis is challenging me to really start, to look at, to try to be empathetic and try to see something from the other person's point of view, where Screwtape is saying to Wormwood, get him to keep thinking about his own annoyances and
Yeah.
so forth. So I'm very appreciative of this third letter.
Well, folks, I hope you have enjoyed this as much as we are still enjoying it, and look forward to being back together for the next letter. with that, light something you like. Enjoy this week.